Billionaire thought his daughter was deaf until the waitress discovered that. Her deafness was a cover-up for a billion-dollar secret. The words, "eliminate the problem," should have terrified me. Instead, I calculated how long I had before my father's men realized I'd heard every detail of their plan to murder Maya Brennan. 12 years of perfect silence, and a coffee cup was about to destroy everything. I kept my eyes fixed on the medical journal in my lap, fingers moving in the practiced rhythm of someone reading Braille, while my father's voice cut through the private dining room like shattered glass. The waitress saw something. Felix confirmed it on the security footage. My chest constricted. Maya. The girl who'd been serving our table for the past hour, who'd caught me flinching when a wine glass shattered 3 tables away. Such a tiny mistake. Such catastrophic timing. "Sir, she could be handled quietly," Felix Santos said, his tone carrying the same casual inflection he might use to discuss weather. "Car accident. Very clean." The leather chair creaked as my father leaned back. Elena Cordero never raised his voice when ordering someone's death. 23 confirmed kills over the past decade, and he'd never spoken above a whisper for any of them. I should know. I'd heard him order every single one. "How old?" my father asked. 22. Law student at Georgetown. Works 3 jobs. No family money. No political connections. No one who'd ask uncomfortable questions. Perfect victim profile. I'd memorized the criteria years ago. Maya reappeared at our table, coffee pot trembling slightly in her hand. Beautiful girl. Warm brown eyes that had looked at me with genuine kindness when she'd asked in careful, practiced signs if I needed anything special. She'd taken an ASL class. She'd explained through her halting finger movements. Wanted to help. Now she was going to die for wanting to help. "More coffee, Mr. Cordero?" Her voice carried just a hint of nervousness. She knew something was wrong but couldn't pinpoint what. My father smiled the way sharks smile before feeding. "Thank you, Maya. You've been exceptionally observant tonight." The coffee cup slipped from her fingers. Time fractured. The ceramic exploded against marble flooring in a starburst of destruction that would have made me jump, scream, react if I were anyone other than Elena Cordero, the deaf daughter who couldn't hear anything. But Maya was watching me, and in the split second between impact and aftermath, I saw her eyes widen as my gaze tracked the falling cup's trajectory before it hit the ground. She knew. Felix's hand moved toward his jacket. Maya stumbled backward, abandoning the coffee pot, her eyes still locked on mine with dawning understanding. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Cordero. I'll get someone to..." "Sit down, Maya." My father's voice carried absolute authority. Maya's legs folded automatically, pulling her into the chair across from me. The same chair where 3 hours ago, she'd carefully positioned herself in my line of sight before fingerspelling beautiful bracelet about the medical alert jewelry I wore. The bracelet that proclaimed to the world, "Deef." She was trembling now. "Hey, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you're watching from." "Felix, close the doors," my father said. The dining room sealed. Private. Soundproof. I'd watched 4 people die in rooms just like this. Maya's breathing accelerated, flight response kicking in. But Felix positioned himself between her and the exit, hands clasped behind his back in a deceptively relaxed pose that I recognized as combat-ready. "Elena," my father said, and I lifted my head with the practiced blankness I'd perfected over 12 years. "Say goodbye to our new friend." This was my test. My father had suspected something for weeks. I'd caught him watching me more carefully, setting tiny audio traps I'd barely avoided. Now he was using Maya as bait, waiting to see if his deaf daughter would react to a stranger's murder. I looked at Maya with the polite confusion I'd shown thousands of people who'd tried to communicate with me verbally. Tilted my head slightly, waited for someone to translate. Maya's lips formed a single word, "Please." The word I couldn't officially hear. The word that might save her life, if I could find a way to warn her without destroying us both. My hands moved in careful ASL. "I don't understand. Did she say something?" Felix translated with mechanical precision. "She said, 'Please, miss.'" I nodded and signed back. "Please what?" But Maya wasn't watching my hands. She was staring at my face, searching for any sign that I understood the horror unfolding, that I could hear her heart breaking as she realized she was about to die for noticing what others had missed for over a decade. My father leaned forward. "Tell me, Maya, what exactly did you see?" She could lie, claim she'd imagined it, apologize for the confusion and walk away. I willed her to choose survival over truth. Instead, she straightened in her chair and spoke directly to me. "I saw you hear that coffee cup fall. The room went silent except for the whisper of Felix's weapon sliding from its holster. And for the first time in 12 years, I made a choice that Elena Cordero, the deaf, helpless daughter, would never make. I spoke. "You're right." The sound of my own voice after 12 years of silence felt like swallowing glass. Maya's face crumpled with relief, so profound it physically hurt to witness. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, I watched her realize she wasn't insane, wasn't imagining things, wasn't about to die for a hallucination. Then I watched her realize she might die anyway. "Fascinating," my father murmured, his tone carrying the same clinical interest he'd used when describing the efficiency of various assassination methods. 12 years, Elena. 12 years of specialists, therapy, medical consultations. The Academy Awards should give you a lifetime achievement. Felix's weapon remained drawn but lowered. Confusion flickered across his face. The same man who could calculate kill trajectories without blinking suddenly looked like a child trying to solve calculus. "I don't understand," Maya whispered, her eyes darting between my father and me. You've been pretending to be deaf? For 12 years? The question hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. How do you explain that you chose silence because sound meant death? That you've lived your entire adolescence in a performance so perfect that even you sometimes forgot who you really were underneath? "Elena," my father said, and my real name from his lips felt like a physical blow. "Look at me." I turned to face him for the first time since I was 7 years old. Really face him. Not the careful, unfocused gaze of someone reading lips. Direct eye contact between two people who knew exactly what the other was capable of. He looked older, grayer. The weight of running a surveillance empire worth $50 billion had carved lines around his eyes that I'd never noticed while pretending not to see him clearly. "The question," he continued, "is why?" Maya shifted in her chair. Smart girl, she'd identified the real danger in the room, and it wasn't the man with the gun. It was the billionaire who spoke about murder like menu planning. "I was 7, I said, my voice still rough from disuse. "I heard you on the phone with Senator Hayes. You were discussing the Kellerman problem." My father's expression didn't change, but Felix's grip tightened on his weapon. Thomas Kellerman, the whistleblower who'd tried to expose Cordero Technologies' illegal data harvesting. The man whose suicide had made national news for exactly 3 days before disappearing from media coverage entirely. "You were supposed to be asleep," my father said. "I had nightmares. I came to your office looking for you." The memory felt like touching an infected wound. "I heard you tell Hayes that Kellerman would be eliminated within 48 hours. I heard you describe exactly how it would look like suicide." Maya made a small sound, part gasp, part whimper. The kind of noise someone makes when they realize they've stumbled into something infinitely larger and more dangerous than they'd imagined. "And you decided," my father said slowly, "to pretend you'd heard nothing, by pretending you could hear nothing at all. At first, I was just scared you'd realize I'd been listening. So I acted like I was asleep when you found me the next morning. But then Kellerman died, exactly like you said he would, and I understood. I swallowed hard. I understood what would happen to people who heard too much." The silence stretched until Maya broke it. "You've been living like this for 12 years because you were afraid your own father would kill you?" I turned to look at her. Really look at her for the first time. Maya Brennan, 22 years old, working 3 jobs to pay for law school, still believing in a world where fathers didn't murder their children for inconvenient knowledge. "Maya," I said gently, "in the past decade, my father has ordered the deaths of 23 people who threatened his business interests. I've heard him plan every single one." Her face went white. "That's impossible. You're talking about serial murder, corporate assassination. That doesn't happen in real life." Felix laughed, a sound like breaking bones. "Tell that to the investigative journalist who overdosed last month, or the former NSA analyst who had that unfortunate heart attack in February." "Stop," my father said quietly, and Felix went silent instantly. The kind of instantaneous obedience that comes from witnessing what happens to people who don't follow orders quickly enough. My father studied Maya with the intensity of a scientist examining bacteria. "What we have here is a problem of multiple vectors. Elena has been my perfect surveillance asset for over a decade, collecting intelligence I couldn't gather through traditional means. People say anything around a disabled child. The casual cruelty of it hit me fresh. I wasn't his daughter in this moment. I was a tool that had malfunctioned. But now," he continued, "we have a witness to Elena's condition. And Elena has revealed herself to protect that witness, which suggests an emotional compromise that makes her unreliable." Maya's voice came out as barely a whisper. What are you going to do? What do you think will happen next? Drop a comment below. Do you think Elena made the right choice revealing herself? My father smiled, and I felt Maya shudder beside me. I didn't blame her. I'd been watching that smile for 12 years, and it never meant anything good. Elena, he said, you have a choice to make. You can return to being my deaf daughter, and Maya will experience an unfortunate accident on her way home tonight. Or, he paused, letting the alternative hang between us like a noose. Or? I asked, though I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. Or you can finally put your unique skills to proper use. I have a job that requires someone people trust implicitly. Someone innocent. Someone above suspicion. His gaze flicked to Maya. Someone who needs motivation to ensure complete loyalty. Maya grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold and trembling. What kind of job? The kind, my father said, that will determine whether Miss Brennan lives to see her law school graduation. I felt Maya's pulse racing through her wrist where it pressed against mine. 22 years old. Probably never even gotten a speeding ticket. Now she was trapped in a room with a man who killed people like other people fired employees. But there was something else in her touch. Something that made me look at her more carefully. She wasn't just terrified. She was angry. And underneath the anger, I saw something that made my chest tighten, with an emotion I'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Maya Brennan might be the first person in 12 years who wasn't asking me to save myself. She was asking me to save her. And for the first time since I was 7 years old, I thought I might know how. There's a hearing scheduled for next week, my father said, pulling out a tablet and sliding it across the table. Senate Intelligence Committee. They're investigating Cordero Technologies' government contracts. I stared at the screen. Committee roster, witness list, security protocols, the kind of classified information that shouldn't exist outside of congressional offices. How did you? Maya started, then stopped herself. Stupid question. Of course he had sources everywhere. Senator Patricia Vance is leading the investigation, my father continued. She's been gathering evidence for months. Whistleblowers, former employees, paper trails. She believes she can prove that Cordero Technologies has been illegally surveilling American citizens and selling that data to foreign governments. Maya's grip on my hand tightened. Is she right? Completely, my father said without hesitation. We've collected behavioral data on over 200 million Americans. Browsing habits, location tracking, private communications, financial transactions, all perfectly legal under the contracts we negotiated, but the public doesn't understand the fine print. That's monstrous, Maya breathed. That's profitable, Felix corrected. 47 billion in revenue over the past 8 years. I studied the witness list more carefully. Former Cordero Technologies employees, NSA analysts, tech journalists, all people who'd discovered pieces of the surveillance network, all people who'd stayed alive because they didn't have enough evidence to pose a real threat. Until now. Senator Vance has been careful, my father said. She's built her case slowly, gathering testimony from multiple sources, but she's missing the keystone piece of evidence that would make her case unshakable. What piece? I asked, though a cold certainty was already spreading through my chest. Direct testimony from someone who witnessed the planning meetings, someone who heard the illegal orders being given, someone who can confirm that the surveillance program was designed specifically to circumvent constitutional protections. Maya looked between us. Elena? I nodded slowly. I've heard him plan every aspect of the program for years. Constitutional violations, bribery of government officials, targeting of political dissidents. I'm the only witness to the inner workings. Which is why, my father said, you're going to testify on my behalf. The words hit like a physical blow. What? Senator Vance is expecting a whistleblower. She's expecting someone to confirm her worst fears about Cordero Technologies. Instead, she's going to get my devoted daughter, testifying about what an honest, patriotic company we run. Maya jerked in her chair. You want her to lie to Congress? I want her to perform, my father corrected. Elena has been giving flawless performances her entire life. One more won't hurt. The tablet displayed my testimony schedule. 10 a.m. next Thursday. Televised hearings. Under oath. Elena Cordero, the deaf daughter of Damian Cordero, testifying about her father's character and business practices. The beautiful part, my father continued, is that Elena's disability makes her the perfect witness. Who would suspect a deaf girl of lying about what she heard? The committee will treat her like a victim, not a threat. Her testimony will destroy Vance's credibility and end the investigation. My hands were shaking. 12 years of hiding, and he wanted me to expose myself on national television. Not as a whistleblower, but as his weapon. And if I refuse? I asked. Felix shifted position slightly. The barrel of his gun caught the light. Maya dies, my father said simply. Tonight. Car accident on her way home. Very tragic. Very final. Maya's breathing accelerated. I could feel her pulse hammering against her wrist. But, my father continued, if you testify as planned, Maya lives. More than that, I'll ensure she graduates law school debt-free. Full scholarship, courtesy of Cordero Technologies Educational Foundation. Carrot and stick, Maya whispered. Effective motivation, my father corrected. The choice crystallized in front of me with brutal clarity. Testify falsely to protect the surveillance empire that had destroyed lives and violated the Constitution, or watch Maya die because she'd been kind to a girl she thought was deaf. But there was something my father hadn't considered. Something he couldn't know because he'd never bothered to understand who I'd become during 12 years of invisible observation. I wasn't just a witness to his crimes, I was evidence. There's a problem with your plan, I said slowly. Which is? I pulled out my phone, the same phone I'd carried for 3 years. The same phone my father had never bothered to monitor because deaf children don't need sophisticated communication devices. The same phone that had been recording every conversation in every room I'd entered. I have audio documentation of every planning meeting you've held in my presence for the past 3 years. Detailed discussions of constitutional violations, bribery, murder, all time-stamped, all backed up to encrypted servers. My father's face went very still. That's impossible. Voice-activated recording app, triggered by specific keywords. Elimination, termination, problem disposal, constitutional workaround. You taught me to pay attention to euphemisms. Felix raised his weapon. Boss? But my father held up a hand, his mind racing through implications. Where are the files? Distributed across 17 different servers. Cloud storage, private networks, encrypted backup systems, all with dead man switches. Meaning? If I don't check in every 72 hours, everything uploads automatically to WikiLeaks, the Washington Post, and Senator Vance's investigation team. Maya stared at me. You've been planning this. For 3 years, I confirmed. Ever since I watched my father order the assassination of that investigative journalist, I realized that staying hidden was just enabling more murders. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Maya's quick breathing, and the whisper of Felix adjusting his grip on his weapon. My father leaned back in his chair, studying me with something that might have been pride if it weren't so terrifying. Checkmate, he said quietly. Not yet, I replied. Stalemate. Explain. You can't kill me because that triggers the data release. But you can't let me testify truthfully because that destroys your empire. I looked directly into his eyes. And you can't use Maya as leverage anymore because I've already made my choice. Which is? I stood up, pulling Maya to her feet beside me. I'm going to testify next Thursday. I'm going to tell the truth about everything I've heard. And Senator Vance is going to have enough evidence to dismantle your surveillance network and put you in federal prison. What do you think is Elena making the right call here? Drop a comment and let me know if you're Team Elena or if you think she's in over her head. Felix looked to my father for orders. Maya's hand squeezed mine so tightly I could feel her fingernails breaking skin. And my father smiled. The same smile he'd worn when ordering Thomas Kellerman's death. The same smile he'd worn when describing 23 different murders. Elena, he said softly, you're forgetting something important. What? I don't need to kill you to destroy you. He pulled out his own phone, scrolled to a contact, and hit dial. Dr. Cross? Yes, this is Elena Cordero. I need you to prepare Elena's psychiatric evaluation for immediate release to the media. My blood turned to ice. Dr. Amelia Cross, my supposed audiologist. The woman who'd been documenting my treatment for 12 years. What evaluation? Maya asked. My father put the call on speaker. Hello, Elena. Doctor. Cross's voice filled the room. I'm so sorry you'll have to hear this, but your father has asked me to explain your situation to your friend. Dr. Cross has been monitoring Elena's psychological development since age 7, my father said. Tell them about Elena's condition. Elena suffers from a severe dissociative disorder triggered by childhood trauma, Dr. Cross said clinically. She experiences elaborate auditory hallucinations that she believes are real conversations. The deafness is actually a psychological protective mechanism. She's blocking out reality because her mind can't process the trauma of witnessing her father's alleged criminal activities. Maya's face went white. That's not true. The recordings Elena believes she's made, Dr. Cross continued, are all fabricated. Her phone contains hours of audio that she's convinced herself are evidence of crimes, but they're actually just recordings of television shows, podcast interviews, and news broadcasts that her disturbed mind has recontextured as personal memories. "You're lying," I whispered. "The psychiatric community has been documenting Elena's condition for years," my father said. "We have medical records, professional evaluations, and expert testimony ready to prove that Elena Cordero is a deeply disturbed young woman who's created an elaborate fantasy world in which her loving father is a criminal mastermind." The room began to spin. 12 years of evidence, 3 years of careful documentation, all of it about to be reframed as the delusions of a traumatized girl who'd never recovered from childhood psychological damage. "The beauty of it," my father continued, "is that it's partially true. Elena did witness something traumatic when she was 7. She did develop a psychological protective mechanism. She has been living in a constructed reality ever since. But the crimes," Maya started, "will be dismissed as the fantasies of someone who needs psychiatric treatment, not criminal investigation," my father finished. "Elena will be hospitalized for her own protection. The recordings will be discredited as evidence of mental illness. And Senator Vance's investigation will collapse because her star witness is certifiably insane." I felt my carefully constructed world crumbling around me. Everything I'd planned, everything I'd sacrificed, all of it about to be destroyed, not by bullets or car accidents, but by the simple reframing of truth as delusion. "Elena," Maya said quietly, "the recordings are real, right? The crimes you described, they actually happened?" I looked at her, this woman who'd accidentally discovered my secret and was now trapped in the wreckage of my 12-year deception, and realized I couldn't answer her question. Because, after 12 years of living a lie, I was no longer certain what was real and what was performance, what was memory and what was construction, what was truth and what was the elaborate fantasy of a 7-year-old girl who'd never learned how to process trauma. Maybe I really was insane. Maybe none of this had ever been real. The psychiatric evaluation felt like drowning in documents. Maya and I sat in her studio apartment 3 hours later, surrounded by medical records that Dr. Cross had helpfully provided to demonstrate my mental instability. 12 years of carefully crafted lies disguised as professional treatment. "Listen to this," Maya said, reading from a psychological assessment dated 6 months ago. "Patient exhibits classic symptoms of paranoid ideation, constructing elaborate scenarios in which family members pose existential threats. Recommends continued medication and supervised socialization." "I was never on medication," I said, but my voice sounded uncertain even to myself. Maya held up a prescription bottle she'd found in my purse, the same purse I'd carried for 2 years. "Antipsychotics. My name on the label. Prescribed by Dr. Cross." "Elena," she said gently, "when did you last take these?" I stared at the bottle. I had no memory of taking psychiatric medication, no memory of filling these prescriptions, but the pharmacy records showed automatic refills dating back 18 months. "I don't remember," I whispered. "What if?" Maya's voice trailed off. "What if what? What if you've been taking medication that affects your memory? What if that's why you can't remember taking it?" The possibility opened up like a chasm beneath my feet. If my father had been drugging me without my knowledge, how much of my memory could I trust? How many of my carefully preserved recordings might actually be pharmaceutical-induced hallucinations? I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. The audio files were still there. 3 years of documentation. But now, listening to them again, something felt wrong. "Play this one," Maya said, pointing to a file dated 3 months ago. I hit play. My father's voice filled the room. "The Senator Hartwell problem needs to be resolved permanently. Felix, arrange an accident." But underneath his words, I could hear something I'd never noticed before. A faint electronic echo, the kind of distortion that comes from audio editing software. "Elena," Maya said carefully, "this sounds like it's been manipulated." I fast-forwarded through the file. More conversations about assassination, bribery, constitutional violations, all with the same subtle electronic signature that suggested digital manipulation. My hands started shaking. "No, these are real. I remember these conversations." "But you just said you don't remember taking medication that could affect your memory." The circular logic was making me nauseous. If my memory was unreliable, then my evidence was unreliable. If my evidence was unreliable, then my memories might be false. If my memories were false, then maybe I really was delusional. "We need to verify something," Maya said, opening her laptop. "Something external. Something that doesn't depend on your memory or your recordings." She pulled up news archives, searching for the deaths my father had allegedly ordered. Thomas Kellerman, the original whistleblower, the investigative journalist, the NSA analyst. Here, she said, pointing to the screen. Thomas Kellerman, suicide by hanging, March 15th, 12 years ago. You said you heard your father order his death? The night before, March 14th. But the news article showed something I hadn't known. Kellerman's suicide note, found on his computer, had been posted online 6 hours before he died. 6 hours before the phone conversation I'd allegedly overheard. Elena, this doesn't make sense. How could your father have been planning Kellerman's death if Kellerman had already posted a suicide note? I stared at the timeline, feeling my carefully constructed reality cracking further. Maybe I misremembered the date. Or maybe, Maya said gently, maybe you heard about Kellerman's death on the news, and your trauma response created a false memory of overhearing the planning. The room felt like it was tilting. Every piece of evidence I'd clung to for 12 years was dissolving under scrutiny. Every memory that had defined my identity was revealing itself as potentially fabricated. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Check your email. Time to learn the truth. A friend. I opened my email. New message with a video attachment. The sender's address was encrypted, untraceable. Should we watch it? Maya asked. I hit play. The video showed my father's office from 12 years ago. Security footage from the night I'd supposedly overheard the Kellerman conversation. Timestamp. March 14th, 11:47 p.m. In the video, I watched my 7-year-old self enter the office, hide behind the desk, and listen to my father's phone conversation. Every detail exactly as I remembered it, except the audio. The security footage included sound. My father's voice, clear and unmistakable. Patricia, I understand your concerns about Kellerman, but suicide is never the answer. If he's struggling with depression, we need to get him professional help. A completely different conversation than what I remembered. A compassionate conversation about preventing suicide, not ordering murder. Elena, Maya breathed. What did you actually hear that night? I watched my 7-year-old self on screen, saw the exact moment when trauma fractured my perception. The moment when a caring father's conversation about preventing suicide became a criminal's order for assassination in my terrified child's mind. The video continued. Showed my father finding me behind his desk. Showed his concern, his gentle questions about why I was scared. Showed him carrying me back to bed, promising everything would be okay. No threats, no murder plans, just a worried father comforting a frightened child. The other deaths, I said frantically, pulling up news articles. The journalist who overdosed, the NSA analyst with the heart attack. Maya researched alongside me. Each death I'd attributed to my father's orders showed the same pattern. Natural causes, medical explanations, no evidence of foul play. I've been living in a delusion for 12 years, I whispered. But Maya was frowning at her laptop screen. Elena, wait, look at this. She'd pulled up financial records for Dr. Cross. Payment schedules from Cordero Technologies dating back 12 years. Your father has been paying your psychiatrist, not through insurance, direct payments, substantial ones, for my treatment. For treatment that involved creating false memories of medication you don't remember taking? For therapy sessions that convinced you your caring father was a serial killer? Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up more records, bank transfers, shell company payments, a complex financial network connecting Dr. Cross to my father's business interests. Elena, what if your father isn't a murderer? What if he's something worse? What could be worse? What if he's been deliberately driving you insane? The question hit like lightning. What if the psychiatric manipulation wasn't a defense against my accusations? What if it was the original plan? What if Dr. Cross had been systematically implanting false memories, false evidence, false reality into my mind for 12 years? But why would my father want me to believe he was a criminal? Maya found the answer in a legal document buried in corporate filings. My father's will, updated 6 months ago. In the event of Elena Cordero's death, or incapacitation, control of Cordero Technologies would pass to his daughter Elena, unless she was deemed mentally incompetent to manage the inheritance. $50 billion, Maya breathed. If you're declared insane, the company goes to... who? I scrolled down to the alternative beneficiary clause. Dr. Amelia Cross, my psychiatrist, the woman who'd been documenting my mental illness for 12 years, the woman my father had been secretly funding through shell companies, the woman who was positioned to inherit his entire empire if his daughter was ruled mentally incompetent. It's not about hiding crimes, I realized. It's about stealing my inheritance. My phone rang. My father's number. Elena. His voice was warm, concerned, loving. The voice of a man who'd spent 12 years gaslighting his own daughter. Dr. Cross told me you've been having another episode. Are you safe? Do you need me to come get you? I looked at Maya, this stranger who'd accidentally saved my life by witnessing my reaction to a falling coffee cup. This woman who'd helped me uncover the truth that my father and his accomplice had been systematically destroying my sanity for 12 years. Not to hide his crimes. To steal my birthright. Elena? My father's voice carried perfect paternal concern. Sweetheart, you're scaring me. Dr. Cross says you've been making accusations again. About recordings that don't exist. About crimes that never happened. I could play along, pretend to believe I was delusional. Return to his care and Dr. Cross's treatment. Let them finish what they'd started and inherit the empire built on my manufactured madness. Or I could do something they'd never planned for. I could trust the one person who'd seen me clearly enough to notice when I wasn't really deaf. Dad, I said into the phone, my voice steady for the first time in hours. I need to tell you something. What is it, sweetheart? I know what you and Dr. Cross have been doing to me. Silence on the other end. And I'm going to stop you. Are you starting to piece together the real conspiracy here? Drop a comment. Do you think Elena's father is actually innocent of murder but guilty of something even more twisted? Maya might be Elena's only chance at proving her sanity. The phone went dead in my hands. Maya and I stared at each other across her cluttered coffee table, surrounded by the wreckage of my demolished worldview. Medical records proving 12 years of pharmaceutical manipulation. Financial documents revealing a conspiracy to steal my inheritance. Security footage showing that my most traumatic memory had been systematically distorted into something unrecognizable. He's going to move fast now, I said. We just destroyed 12 years of careful setup. What do you mean? Think about it. They've been building a case for my mental incompetence for over a decade. All they needed was the right trigger event to have me committed. I gestured at the scattered papers. This conversation, this discovery, this moment of paranoid revelation about conspiracies, it's perfect evidence of a psychotic break. Maya's laptop chimed with an incoming call. Video chat request from Dr. Cross. Don't answer it, I said. But Maya had already hit accept. Dr. Cross's face filled the screen. Professional concern mixed with barely concealed satisfaction. Elena, I'm so glad I found you. Your father is extremely worried. I bet he is. Maya, is it? I need you to understand that Elena is experiencing a severe psychiatric crisis. Nothing she's told you tonight is reliable. She's combining real events with elaborate delusions. Like what? Maya asked, her voice carefully neutral. The financial records she's shown you are real, but they represent legitimate medical expenses for Elena's ongoing treatment. The security footage is authentic, but Elena's interpretation of what she saw as a child has been distorted by years of trauma-induced false memory syndrome. Dr. Cross leaned forward, her voice taking on the practiced authority of someone who'd convinced judges and juries of expert testimony hundreds of times. Elena believes her father has been deliberately gaslighting her, but the reality is more heartbreaking. She's been gaslighting herself, creating elaborate conspiracy theories to avoid accepting that she suffers from a hereditary mental illness that requires lifelong management. I watched Maya's face, searching for any sign that Dr. Cross's explanation was convincing her. Maya had known me for exactly 6 hours. Dr. Cross had professional credentials and 12 years of documentation. The phone call Elena made to her father just now, Dr. Cross continued, represents a clear escalation of her paranoid ideation. She's now making direct threats against the people trying to help her. This is typically when patients become dangerous to themselves or others. Dangerous how? Maya asked. Elena has been obsessing about exposing imaginary crimes for years. She's created detailed plans for revenge against people she believes have wronged her. The step from fantasy violence to actual violence is often precipitated by exactly this kind of confrontational episode. Maya looked at me. Elena, have you ever planned to hurt anyone? The honest answer was yes. I'd spent countless hours imagining what I would do to the people responsible for Thomas Kellerman's death. Detailed scenarios of justice and retribution that had sustained me through years of isolation. But those fantasies had been based on crimes that never happened, targeting people who were innocent of everything except trying to treat my mental illness. I started, then stopped. How do you prove your sanity when the very act of defending yourself sounds insane? How do you convince someone that you're not delusional when all your evidence has been systematically fabricated to look like the product of delusion? Elena's hesitation is telling, Dr. Cross said gently. She's beginning to recognize that her constructed reality doesn't align with objective truth. This is often the moment when patients either accept treatment or become completely detached from reality. Maya closed the laptop, cutting off Dr. Cross mid-sentence. Elena, she said, I need you to answer one question, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Okay. Setting aside everything about your father, everything about Dr. Cross, everything about recordings and medical records in the 6 hours I've known you, have you behaved like someone who's mentally ill? I considered the question. In 6 hours, I'd made rational decisions under extreme pressure. I'd analyzed complex evidence. I'd adapted my strategy when new information emerged. I'd protected Maya's safety while pursuing my own goals. No, I said. I've behaved like someone who's been systematically abused and manipulated, but I haven't behaved like someone who's psychotic or delusional. That's what I think too. Maya pulled out her phone. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get external verification of your mental state from someone who has no connection to your father or Dr. Cross. She started scrolling through contacts. My study partner from law school, Jordan Clark. Their mom is a forensic psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins, someone who evaluates mental competence for court cases. Maya, we don't have time for... My phone buzzed. Text from my father. Elena, Dr. Cross and I are coming to get you. For your own safety, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Another text, 30 seconds later. We've contacted emergency services. They should arrive at Maya's address within 10 minutes. Maya's face went pale. They know where I live? Felix probably followed us. I moved to the window, peering through the blinds. 2 black SUVs parked across the street. They're already here. The sound of footsteps in the hallway outside Maya's apartment. Heavy boots, multiple people. Elena Cordero? A voice through the door. This is emergency psychiatric services. We have a court order for involuntary commitment. Maya grabbed her laptop and phone. Back exit? Fire escape. But Maya, if you help me, you become part of my delusion in their narrative. You become someone who enabled a dangerous psychiatric patient. I know. She headed for the window. But here's the thing about law school. It teaches you to recognize when someone's constitutional rights are being violated. We climbed out onto the fire escape as the front door splintered inward. 5 floors up, winter night air cutting through my clothes like knives. Elena! My father's voice echoed from the apartment. Please don't hurt yourself. We're here to help. Maya and I made it to the alley before the building's exits were covered. Her car, a decade-old Honda, that started on the 3rd try. Where? She asked, pulling onto the street. Somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses and security cameras, I thought frantically. The airport. Why the airport? Federal jurisdiction. If they try to take me by force, it becomes a federal crime. And airport security footage is harder to manipulate than private surveillance. Maya floored the accelerator. Elena, there's something I didn't tell you. What? When I was researching Dr. Cross's financial records, I found something else. Other patients. Other young people from wealthy families who've been in her care for unexplained psychiatric conditions. My stomach dropped. How many? 7 in the past 15 years. All from families worth more than $1 billion. All declared mentally incompetent right before major inheritance events. What happened to them? 3 are in permanent psychiatric facilities. 2 committed suicide. 1 died in a suspicious accident. Maya's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. 1 disappeared entirely, no death certificate, no medical records, after those 2019. 7 victims. 7 families destroyed by a systematic inheritance scam disguised as psychiatric treatment. Maya, you realize what this means? What? You're not just helping me escape involuntary commitment. You're helping expose a serial financial predator who's been destroying people's lives for decades. Maya pulled into the airport's departure area, parking in a spot that would put us under maximum surveillance coverage. Elena, she said, before we go in there, I need you to know something. What? My study partner Jordan, the one whose mother is a forensic psychiatrist? Maya's voice was shaking. I lied. Jordan doesn't exist. I don't have any contacts who could help evaluate your mental state. My world tilted again. Then why? Because I needed you to believe we had options. I needed you to stay rational and hopeful long enough for me to figure out how to actually help you. I stared at her. So, you manipulated me? Yes. To make me feel better about a hopeless situation? Yes. Like everyone else in my life has been doing. Maya met my eyes. No, Elena. Everyone else in your life has been manipulating you to serve their interests. I manipulated you to serve yours. There's a difference. Airport security was walking toward our car. We had maybe 30 seconds before they moved us along or demanded identification. What now? I asked. Now we find out who Elena Cordero really is when she's not performing deafness, not fighting delusions, and not running from conspiracies. Maya opened her car door. We find out who you are when you're just a person trying to save her own life. What do you think? Is Maya someone Elena can finally trust? Or is this just another layer of manipulation? Drop a comment. This psychological chess game has my head spinning. Behind us, black SUVs were pulling into the airport. My father and Dr. Cross had found us. Time to discover whether 12 years of survival had made me strong enough to fight back. The airport terminal was buzzing with late-night travelers, but I felt completely exposed under the fluorescent lights. Maya and I found seats near the departure boards where security cameras would capture everything, surrounded by witnesses who had no idea they were about to watch a billionaire try to have his daughter committed. There, Maya pointed across the terminal. My father walked through the entrance with Dr. Cross and 2 men I didn't recognize. Not Felix, these were different, younger, professional. The kind of people who specialized in handling difficult psychiatric situations. Elena, Maya said quietly. Before they get here, I need to tell you something else. My stomach clenched. What now? I wasn't just working at that restaurant tonight. I was there specifically to serve your table. The words hit like ice water. What do you mean? Dr. Cross hired me 3 weeks ago. She said you were her patient, that you'd been developing dangerous delusions about your father, and that someone needed to document when you broke character. Maya's voice was barely a whisper. She said it was for your own protection. I felt the last solid ground disappear beneath me. So this whole night, you've been working for them? I was supposed to catch you reacting to sound, yes. I was supposed to get it on video and report back to Dr. Cross. Maya's hands were shaking. But Elena, when I saw you flinch at that coffee cup, when I realized you'd been living this lie for 12 years, I couldn't do it. Why should I believe you? Because Dr. Cross is paying me $15,000 to betray you, and I'm here in an airport about to lose everything instead of collecting my money. My father's group was halfway across the terminal now. Moving with purpose, but not urgency, they didn't want to cause a scene that would complicate the involuntary commitment process. 15,000, I said. That's a lot of money for a law student working 3 jobs. It's exactly what I need to pay off my loans and graduate debt-free. Maya met my eyes. Which is how Dr. Cross knew I'd say yes. She's been monitoring my financial records for months, waiting for someone desperate enough to help. Someone desperate enough to betray a mentally ill girl. Someone desperate enough to help document the deterioration of someone they genuinely believed was becoming dangerous. Maya pulled out her phone, scrolling to a video file. This is what I was supposed to deliver to Dr. Cross tonight. The video showed me at the restaurant table, flinching when the wine glass shattered. Clear evidence of my ability to hear. Undeniable proof that Elena Cordero, the deaf daughter, was a fraud. But watch what happens next, Maya said. The video continued. Showed my reaction to Maya's signing. Showed genuine gratitude and connection when she'd tried to communicate in ASL. Showed someone who wasn't pretending to be disabled for malicious reasons, but someone who'd been surviving through the only means available. I started recording to expose a lie, Maya said, but what I captured was someone who'd been abused into living that lie. Elena. My father's voice carried across the terminal, warm, concerned, loving. A perfect performance for the dozens of witnesses now watching. Thank God you're safe. We've been so worried. He approached our seating area flanked by Dr. Cross and the 2 specialists. Every step choreographed to look like a concerned family retrieving a mentally ill loved one. Mr. Cordero, one of the specialists said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. We need to keep this calm and non-confrontational. Of course, my father replied. Elena's been having episodes lately. We just want to get her the help she needs. Dr. Cross sat down across from me, her expression mixing professional authority with maternal concern. Elena, sweetheart, Maya called us. She was worried about the things you've been saying, about the accusations you've been making. I looked at Maya, searching her face for any sign of betrayal. She was staring at Dr. Cross with something that looked like disgust. I didn't call you, Maya said flatly. Of course you did, dear. You were concerned about Elena's welfare. Doctor. Cross turned to the gathering crowd of onlookers. Elena suffers from a severe psychiatric condition that causes elaborate paranoid delusions. She sometimes becomes convinced that people are plotting against her. An older woman nearby nodded sympathetically. A business traveler looked up from his phone with concern. Public opinion was forming around Dr. Cross's narrative before I could speak a word in my own defense. "Elena," my father said, sitting down beside me, "you know how much I love you. You know I would never hurt you. These fantasies you've been having about conspiracies and criminal activities, they're symptoms of your illness. Dr. Cross can help, but only if you let her." His voice carried such genuine paternal love that for a moment I almost believed him. Almost believed that 12 years of careful documentation were actually 12 years of elaborate self-deception. Almost believed that the daughter who'd overheard assassination plans was really just a traumatized child who'd never learned to distinguish reality from nightmare. That was his real weapon. Not threats or violence or legal manipulation. Love. After 12 years of no physical affection, no emotional connection, no acknowledgement of my existence as anything other than the deaf girl in the corner, he was offering me everything I'd been desperately craving. Paternal love, family connection, the acceptance I'd sacrificed everything to protect. All I had to do was admit I was insane. What do you think, viewers? Is Elena's father actually showing genuine love here? Or is this emotional manipulation at its most cruel? "The financial records," I said quietly. "The inheritance clause in your will. The payments to Dr. Cross through shell companies." "Elena, Dr. Cross said gently, "those documents you showed Maya tonight? They're fabrications. Part of your elaborate delusion system. Maya can confirm that what you showed her was clearly falsified." All eyes turned to Maya. The moment of truth. She could support Dr. Cross's version, the reasonable explanation that I was mentally ill and had fabricated evidence to support my delusions. She could collect her $15,000 and return to law school with a clear conscience, knowing she'd helped a sick girl get the treatment she needed. Or she could support my version, the impossible conspiracy theory that required believing a respected psychiatrist and loving father had spent 12 years systematically destroying a young woman's sanity for financial gain. Maya looked around at the concerned faces watching our little drama. Airport security approaching slowly, ready to assist with a psychiatric emergency. My father's expression of perfect paternal love, Dr. Cross's professional authority. Then she looked at me. "The financial records Elena showed me weren't fabricated," Maya said clearly. "Dr. Cross has been receiving payments from Cordero Technologies for 12 years. Payments that coincide with Elena's psychiatric treatment, but are structured as business consulting fees, not medical expenses." Dr. Cross's mask slipped for just a moment. "Maya, you're clearly being influenced by Elena's delusions. This is exactly how psychiatric manipulation works." "I'm a third-year law student," Maya interrupted. "I know how to read financial documents. I know how to trace shell company payments. And I know that what Elena showed me tonight would be compelling evidence in any courtroom." The crowd's sympathies began to shift. Murmurs of uncertainty. Someone pulled out a phone to start recording. "Moreover," Maya continued, "Dr. Cross contacted me 3 weeks ago with a job offer that specifically involved documenting Elena's episodes. She provided detailed information about Elena's daily routines, her psychological triggers, and her family's financial situation. Information that shouldn't be available to someone providing legitimate psychiatric care." My father's expression began to harden. The loving parent facade was becoming difficult to maintain under public scrutiny. "You're suggesting," one of the specialists said, "that Dr. Cross has been deliberately manipulating her patient's psychiatric condition?" "I'm stating," Maya replied, "that Dr. Cross offered me $15,000 to betray her patient's trust and document her private moments without consent, which is illegal under HIPAA regulations and constitutes a violation of medical ethics." Dr. Cross stood up abruptly. "This conversation is becoming detrimental to Elena's mental health. We need to remove her from this situation immediately." "Elena," my father said, and for the first time tonight, his voice carried an edge of genuine threat, "you're forcing me to do this the hard way." He gestured to the 2 specialists, who moved closer to my chair. "We have legal authority to take Elena into protective custody," one of them said, showing a document to airport security. "She's been declared a danger to herself and others." Maya grabbed my hand. "Elena, remember what I told you in the car. You've been performing your whole life. Right now, you need to perform sanity. You need to be the most rational, articulate, compelling version of yourself possible." I looked around at the crowd of strangers who would decide my fate in the next 30 seconds. Travelers who'd stumbled into a family drama that would determine whether I spent the next decade in psychiatric confinement or found a way to expose a conspiracy that had destroyed multiple lives. Everything I'd practiced for 12 years, every moment of perfect performance, every calculated response, Every careful manipulation of perception had been rehearsal for this moment. Time to find out if Elena Cordero was strong enough to save herself. Do you think Elena can convince these strangers that she's not mentally ill? Or is the psychiatric commitment order going to be the end of her freedom? Drop a comment with your prediction. I stood up slowly, keeping my movements calm and deliberate. Every gesture had to communicate stability, rationality, competence. 12 years of performance training had led to this moment. "Before you take me anywhere," I said to the specialists, my voice carrying the clear authority of someone who knew exactly what was happening, "I'd like these witnesses to understand what they're seeing." "Elena, you're having an episode," Dr. Cross said quickly. "This public confrontation is exactly the kind of behavior that demonstrates—" "Dr. Cross," I interrupted, turning to address the crowd directly. "How much is my father paying you to have me declared mentally incompetent?" The question hung in the air like a bomb. The specialists looked uncertain. Airport security exchanged glances. A woman with a phone started recording more obviously. "That's an inappropriate question based on delusional thinking," Dr. Cross replied, but her voice had lost its professional steadiness. "Maya," I said, "would you please show these people the financial records on your phone?" Maya held up her phone, displaying bank transfer records. "Dr. Amelia Cross has received over $2 million from Cordero Technologies over the past 12 years. Payments structured as consulting fees, not medical treatment. Those are private medical expenses," my father said, but his voice was tight. "No," Maya replied. "Medical expenses would go through insurance or be paid directly to medical facilities. These payments were made to Dr. Cross's personal consulting company, Cross Psychological Solutions, which provides," she scrolled through corporate filings, "strategic psychological assessments for inheritance and competency determination." A businessman in a suit looked up from his laptop. "Wait, are you saying this doctor specializes in having people declared mentally incompetent for inheritance purposes?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Maya replied. "And Elena is the 7th young person from a billionaire family to be in Dr. Cross's care over the past 15 years. The crowd's energy shifted. This was no longer a family retrieving a mentally ill daughter, this was something much darker. "Elena," one of the specialists said, "regardless of these allegations, we have a legal commitment order that requires—" "Signed by whom?" I asked. The specialist checked his paperwork. "Dr. Cross and Judge Harrison Whitmore." Maya's eyes widened. "Judge Whitmore? Elena, check your father's political donation records." I knew where this was going, but I let Maya explain for the witnesses. "Damien Cordero donated $200,000 to Judge Whitmore's re-election campaign last year," Maya said, reading from her phone. "Judge Whitmore also serves on the board of the Cordero Foundation. So the judge who signed the commitment order," the businessman said slowly, "is financially connected to the father who's having his daughter committed? By a doctor," Maya added, "who specializes in inheritance, related competency evaluations, and has received millions from the father's company." Airport security was now actively listening, their body language shifting from "assist with psychiatric emergency" to "investigate potential fraud." Dr. Cross made her first major mistake. "This conspiracy theory thinking is exactly why Elena needs immediate psychiatric intervention," she said. "She's convinced everyone around her is part of an elaborate plot." "Dr. Cross," I said quietly, "what medication have you been prescribing for my alleged psychiatric condition?" "Elena, patient confidentiality prevents me from—" "I'm waiving confidentiality. Please tell these witnesses what medication you've been giving me." Dr. Cross hesitated. "A combination of antipsychotics and mood stabilizers appropriate for your condition." I pulled the prescription bottle from my purse, the one Maya had found earlier. "This bottle shows automatic refills for 18 months. If I've been taking psychiatric medication for 18 months, shouldn't I have some memory of it?" "Memory issues are a side effect of—" "Dr. Cross," Maya interrupted, "what's the standard protocol for prescribing memory, affecting medication to a patient without their knowledge?" That would be highly irregular. "It would be illegal," Maya said flatly. "Administering psychiatric medication without informed consent is a federal crime." The woman recording everything stepped closer. "Excuse me, are we witnessing an attempted kidnapping disguised as psychiatric intervention?" Dr. Cross's composure cracked completely. "This girl is severely mentally ill. She's been fabricating evidence, creating elaborate conspiracy theories, threatening violence against her father." "When did I threaten violence?" I asked. You've made statements about revenge, about making people pay for their crimes." "When? Where? Do you have recordings of these alleged threats?" Dr. Cross looked to my father for support, but his loving parent mask had dissolved entirely. He was watching our public confrontation with cold calculation, already adjusting his strategy. "Elena," he said, "you're playing a very dangerous game. Am I, or am I finally playing it well?" The crowd was fully engaged now. Someone had called for additional airport security. A TSA supervisor was approaching, along with what looked like federal air marshals. "Sir," one of the marshals said to my father, "we're going to need to see identification and documentation for everyone involved in this situation." My father produced his ID with the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to VIP treatment. But when the marshal scanned it, his expression changed. "Mr. Cordero, we're showing an active federal investigation flag on your profile. You're being monitored in connection with government surveillance contract violations." My father's face went very still. "That investigation was concluded months ago." "No, sir, it's been escalated. As of yesterday, you're a person of interest in a Senate Intelligence Committee investigation." Maya and I exchanged glances. Senator Vance's investigation, the one my father had been trying to discredit by having me testify falsely, was still active. "Moreover," the marshal continued, "we've received a report about potential psychiatric fraud involving inheritance manipulation. Are you Damian Cordero of Cordero Technologies?" "I am, but..." "Sir, I'm going to need you and Dr. Cross to step away from the alleged victim while we sort this out." Dr. Cross made her second fatal mistake. "She's not a victim, she's a patient. She's dangerous to herself and others." "Ma'am," the marshal said, "if she's dangerous, why are you standing 3 feet away from her without any protective security? And why are you conducting psychiatric intervention in a public airport instead of through proper medical channels?" The questions Dr. Cross couldn't answer were piling up faster than she could deflect them. The crowd of witnesses was no longer sympathetic to the concerned family narrative. The federal investigation flag on my father's profile had shifted the entire dynamic. "Elena," my father said, his voice dropping to the lethal whisper I remembered from childhood, "you think you've won something here, but you have no idea what you've just unleashed." For 12 years, that voice had terrified me. The voice that had ordered Thomas Kellerman's death. The voice that had planned 23 assassinations. But now I realized something that changed everything. I'd never actually heard my father order anyone's death. I'd heard Dr. Cross's audio manipulations. I'd experienced pharmaceutical-induced hallucinations. I'd constructed elaborate memories from fragments of trauma and suggestion. My father wasn't a serial killer. He was just a garden-variety billionaire criminal who'd hired a psychiatrist to gaslight his daughter out of her inheritance, which meant he wasn't used to improvising under pressure. He wasn't a master manipulator who'd spent years perfecting murder plans. He was just a rich man whose carefully laid scheme had been exposed by a struggling law student and a daughter who'd learned to perform sanity as perfectly as she'd performed deafness. "Mr. Cordero," I said, and my voice carried 12 years of suppressed strength, "you made one crucial mistake." "What's that?" "You taught me to be invisible. You taught me to listen to everything while appearing to understand nothing. You taught me to perform whatever reality would keep me safe." I gestured to the crowd, the cameras, the federal marshals, the mounting evidence of fraud and manipulation. "But you never considered what would happen when the performance you needed was competence instead of disability, sanity instead of madness, strength instead of helplessness." The marshal was speaking into his radio, requesting backup and additional federal investigators. Dr. Cross was backing toward the exit, her psychiatric authority completely evaporated in the face of criminal investigation. And my father was realizing that his perfect plan had a fatal flaw. He'd trained his victim to be the perfect performer. But he'd forgotten that actors don't just play one role. "The tables are turning. Do you think Elena and Maya have actually exposed the conspiracy? Or is this just another layer of manipulation? Drop a comment. Maya's law school knowledge is really paying off right now." The federal marshal's radio crackled with an update that changed everything. "Sir, we've got teams moving on 7 locations simultaneously. The cross-psychological fraud network is bigger than we anticipated." My father's face went ashen. "What do you mean, 7 locations?" "Dr. Cross," the marshal said, turning to face her, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, medical malpractice, and violation of federal racketeering statutes." Dr. Cross bolted. She made it 15 feet before TSA tackled her to the ground in front of 100 witnesses with cell phone cameras. The woman who'd spent 12 years convincing me I was insane was now shrieking about conspiracies and setups as federal agents cuffed her. "Elena?" Maya whispered. "Look." On Maya's phone, news alerts were flooding in. FBI raids on medical facilities across 5 states. Arrests of judges, lawyers, and medical professionals. Headlines screaming about inheritance fraud network. and Billionaire family conspiracy. But the biggest headline made my chest tighten. 7 victims of psychological manipulation scheme found alive. The missing victims, I breathed. The ones who disappeared or died weren't dead, Maya finished. They were hidden, kept in private facilities where Dr. Cross could maintain control even after the inheritance transfers were complete. A new federal agent approached us older, with the bearing of someone who'd been working this case for months. Miss Cordero? I'm Agent Sarah Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Unit. We've been investigating Dr. Cross's network since 2019, but we needed someone with direct knowledge of her methods to build a prosecutable case. You've been investigating for 4 years? Ever since Jordan Thorne's family reported their son missing after he was declared mentally incompetent. Agent Martinez showed me a photo on her tablet. Young man, early 20s, eyes that looked disturbingly familiar. Jordan had been documenting Dr. Cross's manipulation techniques, but his evidence disappeared when he did. My father tried to edge away from our conversation, but 2 more agents flanked him smoothly. Mr. Cordero, you're also under arrest. Conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery of federal officials, and conspiracy to violate constitutional rights under the surveillance contracts. The surveillance contracts, I said. Those were real? Completely real, Agent Martinez confirmed. Your father's company has been illegally collecting data on American citizens and selling it to foreign governments. Senator Vance's investigation was about to expose the entire network. Maya grabbed my arm. Elena, that means your original memories were accurate. You really did overhear criminal planning when you were 7. But the assassination orders weren't assassinations, Agent Martinez said. They were data termination orders. Eliminate the Kellerman problem meant destroy the data Kellerman had collected, not kill the person. But to a 7-year-old listening to fragments of conversation, it sounded like murder planning. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. My childhood trauma had been real, but misinterpreted. Dr. Cross had then amplified that confusion with pharmaceutical manipulation, false memories, and carefully constructed audio fabrications. The recordings on my phone, I said. The ones that sounded edited. Dr. Cross created those by combining real audio from your father's business calls with fabricated content. She needed you to have evidence of crimes that would sound insane when examined closely. Why go to all that trouble? Why not just have me committed based on the original trauma? Agent Martinez's expression darkened. Because Dr. Cross wasn't just stealing your inheritance. She was perfecting a system. You were the proof of concept for a much larger operation. She showed me another document on her tablet, a business plan for something called Strategic Psychological Solutions. Dr. Cross was franchising the inheritance manipulation model, targeting the children of wealthy families across the country. Your case was her prototype. If she could gaslight a smart, observant child for 12 years without detection, she could scale the operation nationally. The scope of it was staggering. Hundreds of potential victims, billions of dollars in stolen inheritances, a systematic destruction of wealthy families disguised as mental health treatment. The other victims Maya found, I said. How many are still alive? All of them. Dr. Cross kept them in private facilities where she maintained control over their medical records and legal status. They've been prisoners for years, some of them over a decade. Maya was crying, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of realizing that the victims we'd thought were dead had actually been waiting for rescue. Jordan Thorne, I said, looking at his photo again. He's been missing for 5 years? And he's been documenting everything, Agent Martinez said. The moment Dr. Cross tried to have him committed, he started recording her methods. When he disappeared, he was actually placed in a facility where he's been gathering evidence against the entire network. She scrolled to another photo. Jordan Thorne in what looked like a medical facility, but he was clearly alert and functional. He was holding up a sign. Day 1847. Still sane. Still fighting. Elena, Maya said, you weren't just saving yourself tonight. You triggered the takedown of an entire criminal enterprise. Agent Martinez nodded. Your public confrontation in this airport provided the pretext we needed to execute simultaneous raids across 7 states. Dr. Cross's network had been operating for 15 years, but they were careful to avoid federal jurisdiction. Tonight, when they attempted to transport you across state lines under false psychiatric commitment, they gave us the interstate commerce violation we needed. My father was being led away in handcuffs, but he caught my eye one last time. Elena, he called out, whatever happens, you're still my daughter. That was never part of any performance. The words hit harder than I'd expected. Even after everything, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the stolen inheritance part of me still craved his approval. But Agent Martinez showed me one more document that shattered any remaining sympathy. Your father's original plan, she said, involved having you committed permanently after your 21st birthday. Dr. Cross recommended terminating the medication that was affecting your memory and allowing you to remember everything, not to help you, but to ensure that your testimony about his crimes would sound completely insane. He was going to let me remember the truth, only so that telling the truth would prove your madness. It was psychological torture disguised as therapy. Maya squeezed my hand. Elena, it's over. Really over. But I was thinking about something Agent Martinez had said. The other victims, when they're released from the facilities, what happens to them? Extensive rehabilitation, psychological deprogramming, legal proceedings to restore their inheritance rights. Agent Martinez paused. But Elena, they'll need someone who understands what they've been through. Someone who can help them navigate the recovery process. What are you asking? Jordan Thorne specifically requested to meet you. He said that anyone who could maintain a 12-year deception while gathering evidence had the skills to help other victims reclaim their lives. The idea crystallized with startling clarity. I'd spent 12 years learning to be invisible, to observe, to document, to perform whatever role would keep me safe. Those skills could help other survivors do the same. I want to meet him, I said. I want to meet all of them. Elena, Maya said. What about your inheritance? What about Cordero Technologies? Agent Martinez answered before I could. The company will likely be broken up as part of the criminal proceedings. But Elena's personal inheritance, her mother's trust fund and family assets, separate from the business that's worth approximately $8 billion. $8 billion. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Maya, I said, remember when you told me you'd manipulated me to serve my interests instead of your own? Yeah? I want to do something that serves everyone's interests. I looked at Agent Martinez. How much would it cost to fund a legal advocacy organization for victims of psychiatric fraud? That's not typically how inheritance funds are used. How much? Maya understood immediately. Elena, you're talking about creating something that could help victims nationwide. Legal representation, medical advocacy, financial recovery assistance, and staffed by survivors who understand the system from the inside, I added. People who know how to perform sanity because we've had to learn it to survive. Agent Martinez was smiling. Jordan Thorne is going to want to be your partner in this. Will you help us set it up? I asked Maya. When you graduate law school? Elena, are you seriously asking me to help you spend $8 billion on justice? I'm asking you to help me turn 12 years of survival skills into a weapon for protecting other people. Maya's answer was to kiss me. Right there in the airport terminal, in front of federal agents and news cameras and 100 strangers who'd witnessed our entire confrontation. A kiss that felt like the first honest moment I'd experienced in 12 years. When we broke apart, she was crying again. What? I asked. You know what the most beautiful part is? Maya said. Dr. Cross spent 12 years trying to convince you that you were insane. But Elena, sane people don't usually decide to spend their entire inheritance on helping strangers. You're exactly as crazy as someone needs to be to change the world. What do you think about Elena's decision? Should she really spend her inheritance on helping other victims, or should she focus on rebuilding her own life first? Drop a comment with your thoughts. Agent Martinez was coordinating with airport security to clear our area. Media crews were arriving. The story of the psychiatric fraud network was about to become national news. Elena, she said, there's one more thing. Dr. Cross kept detailed records of her methods, including audio recordings of her sessions with you over the years. We found something we think you should hear. She handed me headphones connected to her tablet. The recording was from my first session with Dr. Cross, when I was 8 years old. My own voice, small and terrified. I don't want to pretend anymore. I want to tell the truth about what I heard. And Dr. Cross's voice, already calculating. Elena, sometimes the truth is too dangerous for little girls to carry. But if you're very good at pretending, I can help you stay safe. The 8-year-old me. Promise? Promise. Dr. Cross had been manipulating me from our very first meeting. She'd taken a frightened child who wanted to tell the truth and systematically destroyed her ability to trust her own perceptions. But listening to that recording, I realized something that Dr. Cross had never understood. That 8-year-old girl who wanted to tell the truth was still inside me. She'd been waiting 12 years for someone to tell her it was safe to stop pretending. Maya, I said, pulling off the headphones. I have one more performance to give. What do you mean? I looked at the news cameras, the federal agents, the crowd of witnesses who'd seen a young woman fight for her sanity in an airport terminal. I need to perform being Elena Cordero, not the deaf daughter, not the psychiatric patient, not the inheritance victim. Just Elena, whoever that turns out to be. Maya smiled. I think she's going to be extraordinary. 6 months after that night in the airport, I stood in the lobby of the Kellerman Foundation for Psychiatric Justice, watching Maya argue with a federal prosecutor about victim compensation rights. She'd graduated law school early, passed the bar exam, and was already making opposing counsel wish they'd stayed in corporate law. Elena, Jordan Thorne appeared beside me, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent 5 years documenting psychological warfare and emerged stronger for it. The new intake interview is here. Are you ready? I nodded, though ready felt like a relative term. Each new victim who walked through our doors carried 12 years of my own trauma reflected back in different configurations. But that was precisely why this worked. We recognized each other in ways that traditional therapists never could. How old? I asked. 16. Been in Dr. Cross's network for 3 years. Parents think she's suffering from early-onset schizophrenia, but she's been documenting everything on her phone. Smart girl. Just like we all were. Just like we'd had to be to survive. The conference room held 12 survivors, now ages ranging from 16 to 34, all of us learning to trust our own perceptions again after years of systematic gaslighting. Today's group session was particularly significant because we had a special guest. Thomas Kellerman walked into the room, and my breath caught. Not dead, very much alive, and very interested in meeting the daughter of the man who'd supposedly ordered his assassination. Elena, he said, settling into the circle with the easy grace of someone who'd spent years in therapy himself. I wanted to thank you. For what? For being 7 years old and misunderstanding a phone conversation in exactly the right way. I blinked. What do you mean? Your father's conversation that night, the one you overheard it, really was about eliminating the Kellerman problem. But the problem wasn't me personally. It was the data I'd collected proving Cordero Technologies' illegal surveillance contracts. Kellerman pulled out a tablet, showing me surveillance footage from that night 12 years ago. I was never in physical danger. But your 7-year-old mind heard eliminate Kellerman and understood it as a death threat. That terror you felt? It was completely rational, because you were interpreting fragments of adult conversation through a child's understanding of language. But that means your original trauma was authentic, your protective response was intelligent, and your survival instincts were perfect, Kellerman said. Dr. Cross took a smart child's reasonable fear and weaponized it into self-doubt. Maya appeared in the doorway, still flushed from her legal victory. Elena, you need to see this. She handed me her phone, showing a news alert that made my chest tighten with vindication. Doctor, Amelia Cross sentenced to 47 years in federal prison for inheritance fraud conspiracy. The accompanying article detailed the full scope of her network. 43 victims across 15 states, over $12 billion in stolen inheritances. A systematic operation that had been perfecting psychological manipulation techniques for nearly 2 decades. And this, Maya continued, scrolling to another article. Damian Cordero reaches plea agreement, agrees to testify against remaining conspirators. My father had finally chosen cooperation over defiance. Not out of remorse, but out of legal necessity. Even now, his survival instincts trumped everything else. How do you feel about that? Jordan asked, watching my face carefully. Grateful, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. Not for him, but for the fact that I don't need his approval anymore to know who I am. What do you think? Could you forgive a parent who stole 12 years of your life, even if they helped other victims get justice? This is such a complex moral situation. The afternoon brought our weekly media interview, part of the Foundation's public education mission. Maya had convinced me that telling our story publicly was essential for preventing future victims, even though speaking to cameras still felt like performing. But this performance was different. This time, I was performing strength instead of weakness, competence instead of confusion, truth instead of deception. Elena, the interviewer asked, what would you say to other young people who suspect they're being manipulated by family members or medical professionals? I looked directly into the camera, thinking about the thousands of people who might be watching, wondering if their own reality was being systematically distorted. Trust your instincts, I said. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If people are telling you that your perceptions aren't real, document everything. Record conversations. Save evidence. And most importantly, find someone outside the situation who can help you verify your experience. What role has Maya played in your recovery? I glanced at Maya, sitting just off camera, and felt the same surge of gratitude that had sustained me through 6 months of legal proceedings and psychological rehabilitation. Maya saved my life by seeing me clearly when I couldn't see myself. She proved that love doesn't require fixing someone, sometimes it just requires believing them. After the interview, Maya and I walked through downtown Georgetown, past the restaurant where this had all started. The space had been converted into a crisis counseling center, another project funded by my inheritance turned weapon against psychological manipulation. "Elena," Maya said, stopping in front of the building. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever miss it? The performance of being deaf? The invisibility?" I considered the question. There had been a strange security in being overlooked, in being underestimated, in moving through the world without the burden of other people's expectations. "Sometimes," I admitted. But then I remember that invisibility was never protection. It was prison. And now? Now I get to choose which parts of myself to show and when. That's the difference between survival performance and authentic choice. Maya stopped walking, turning to face me with the expression she wore when she was about to say something that mattered. "Elena, I need to tell you something." My stomach dropped. "What?" "I got the job offer. The one from the ACLU. Civil rights litigation. Exactly what I've been working toward." "Maya, that's incredible. Why do you look worried about it?" "Because it's in San Francisco, and I don't know if I can do this," she gestured between us. "Long distance while you're building the foundation here." The choice crystallized immediately. "Then we move the foundation to San Francisco." "Elena, you can't relocate an entire organization because..." "Maya, do you know how many tech billionaires live in California? How many Silicon Valley families might be vulnerable to inheritance manipulation schemes?" I smiled. "We're not relocating because of our relationship. We're expanding because that's where the work needs to happen next." Maya's expression shifted from worried to amazed. "You've been thinking about this?" "I've been thinking about a lot of things, like how Jordan wants to start a documentary project about psychiatric fraud, like how the other survivors need satellite offices closer to their home states, like how this foundation was never supposed to stay small." "Elena, are you talking about going national?" "I'm talking about going international. Dr. Cross's methods are being replicated in other countries. Inheritance manipulation isn't uniquely American." Maya laughed, the sound that had become my favorite soundtrack over the past 6 months. "Elena Cordero, you are the most beautifully ambitious person I've ever met. Maya Brennan, you taught me that ambition isn't just about personal success. It's about using your skills to make other people's lives better." She kissed me then, right there on the sidewalk where this had all begun, with a conversation between a struggling law student and a girl she thought was deaf. When we broke apart, Maya was grinning. "What?" I asked. "I'm just thinking about how Dr. Cross spent 12 years trying to convince you that you were incapable of understanding reality, and now you're building an organization that helps other people distinguish between truth and manipulation. Poetic justice? Perfect justice." That evening, I sat in my apartment, the first space I'd ever lived in alone, without surveillance, without monitoring, without anyone controlling my environment or my choices. Maya was at the kitchen table, writing legal briefs for tomorrow's court appearance. Jordan was on the couch, editing footage for his documentary. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who knew exactly who I was and chose to be there anyway. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Martinez. "Elena, thought you'd want to know the Senate Intelligence Committee voted unanimously to establish new federal protections against psychiatric fraud. They're calling it the Elena Cordero Act. Legislation bearing my name. Legal protections that would prevent other children from experiencing 12 years of psychological warfare disguised as medical treatment." I showed the message to Maya, who immediately started crying. "Elena," she said, "do you realize what this means? Your survival didn't just save you. It's going to save hundreds of other people." I looked around at my chosen family, Maya preparing to fight for civil rights, Jordan documenting truth, all of us using our trauma as fuel for protecting others. "Maya," I said, "I want to tell you something that might sound crazy." "What?" "I'm grateful for what happened to me." Maya looked up from her legal briefs, eyebrows raised. "Not for the abuse," I clarified quickly. "Not for the trauma or the manipulation or the 12 years of isolation, but for the strength it taught me, for the skills I developed, for the understanding of manipulation that lets me help other people recognize it." "Elena, that's not crazy. That's healing. I spent 12 years performing deafness because I thought silence would keep me safe. Now I know that speaking up loudly, clearly, without apology, is what actually protects people." Jordan looked up from his laptop. "Elena, that's the most powerful ending for the documentary I could imagine. Ending? Beginning, he corrected. This story isn't about what was done to you. It's about what you're doing with what you learned. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway these days. Unknown numbers were usually survivors who'd heard about the foundation and were ready to start their own recovery journey. Elena, this is difficult to say. My name is Rebecca Santos. I'm 17 years old, and I think my psychiatrist has been lying to me about being mentally ill. I saw your interview online, and I think I need help. Maya and Jordan looked up as I switched to speakerphone. Rebecca, I said, you called exactly the right number. Can you tell me how long you've been in treatment? 4 years, since my grandmother died and left me her estate. The psychiatrist says I have severe depression and anxiety, but Rebecca, I've never felt depressed. I've felt, watched, controlled, like someone's been making me doubt my own thoughts. Maya was already pulling up intake forms on her laptop. Jordan was starting a new documentation file. And I was remembering what it felt like to be 17 and desperate for someone to believe that my reality wasn't madness. Rebecca, I said, I believe you. And we're going to help you prove that your instincts are right. What would you do if someone called you right now, desperate for help, trusting you with their entire future? Drop a comment. Elena's work is just beginning. 2 years later, the Kellerman Foundation for Psychiatric Justice had offices in 12 cities and had helped 847 survivors reclaim their legal rights and their inheritance. Maya was arguing cases before federal appeals courts. Jordan's documentary had won an Emmy and sparked congressional hearings. And I was testifying before the International Court of Human Rights about psychiatric manipulation as a form of torture. The methodology is simple, I told the Assembly of International Judges. Isolate the victim through false medical diagnosis. Undermine their trust in their own perceptions through pharmaceutical manipulation. Create dependency on the manipulator through emotional abuse disguised as care. Then harvest the financial benefits when the victim is declared legally incompetent. Miss Cordero, one of the judges asked, what would you say is the most important protection against this form of abuse? I thought about 7-year-old Elena, terrified and confused, making the split-second decision to pretend she couldn't hear. About 12-year-old Elena, documenting conversations she didn't understand. About 19-year-old Elena, finally finding someone who saw her clearly enough to notice she was performing. Witnesses, I said. People who see victims as complete human beings rather than symptoms to be managed. The most powerful weapon against gaslighting is someone who believes your version of reality. The hearing concluded with a unanimous vote to establish international protocols for investigating psychiatric fraud. Another piece of legislation that would prevent others from living through what I'd survived. That evening, Maya and I sat on the deck of our house in San Francisco, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. She was working on a brief for the Supreme Court case that would expand psychiatric fraud protections nationwide. I was reading applications from survivors who wanted to join the Foundation's peer counseling program. Elena, Maya said, setting down her legal pad, do you ever think about what your life would have looked like if I hadn't been working at that restaurant that night? Sometimes, I admitted. But Maya, you were always going to be there. Maybe not that specific restaurant on that specific night, but somewhere. Someone like you was always going to notice that I wasn't quite what I appeared to be. Why do you think that? Because the truth has a way of demanding to be seen. I spent 12 years hiding, but I was never actually invisible. I was just waiting for someone who knew how to look. Maya moved closer, settling against my shoulder in the gesture that had become our signature of safety. Elena, I love you for 1,000 reasons, but mostly because you turned survival into service. I love you because you taught me the difference between performance and authenticity. And because you believe that justice is something worth fighting for, even when it's complicated. Especially when it's complicated. My phone chimed with a message from Rebecca Santos, the 17-year-old who'd called us 2 years ago. She was now a freshman at Stanford, studying psychology and planning to join the Foundation's clinical research division. Elena, her message read, I wanted you to know I got accepted to present my research on psychiatric manipulation at the American Psychological Association conference. They're giving me a platform to speak about prevention protocols. I couldn't have imagined any of this 2 years ago. Thank you for teaching me that surviving is just the beginning. I showed Maya the message, and she smiled with the particular satisfaction of someone watching justice compound itself across generations. Elena, she said, what do you think 7-year-old you would say if she knew this was where her choice to stay silent would eventually lead? I considered the question, thinking about the terrified child who'd made a split-second decision that saved her life and, eventually, hundreds of other lives. I think she'd say that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear, even when disappearing feels like the only way to survive. As the last light faded from the sky, I realized something that would have been impossible to imagine during those 12 years of silence. I was finally free to be as loud as I wanted. Hey everyone, what do you think about Elena's journey from silence to advocacy? The way she turned her trauma into a force for protecting others is incredible, right? This story shows how the skills we develop to survive can become the tools we use to save other people. Drop a comment below and let me know what part of Elena's transformation resonated with you the most. Was it her relationship with Maya? The way she outsmarted Dr. Cross? Or maybe how she chose to use her inheritance to help other victims? And don't forget to hit that like button if this story kept you on the edge of your seat. Subscribe for more emotionally powerful stories that will make you question everything you think you know about family, love, and the price of truth. What story should I tell next? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what kind of emotional journey you want to experience together. Until next time, remember, your voice matters, your truth is valid, and sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is refuse to stay silent when silence serves someone else's agenda. Stay strong, stay authentic, and I'll see you in the next story.